What's Underneath a Human's Helmet? By JCB 112, Part 2. I expected fire and brimstone, an explosion of anger, and the purest expressions of enmity. I half expected the entire corridor to contort and bend in on itself, for the reality around me to simply collapse, or for my very consciousness to cease to be. Those were the rumors of how far human capabilities went, at the very least, for that was simply the level at which humans were at. Yet instead of the expected fallout, instead of any of the multitudes of bad endings that I'd allowed to play out incessantly in my mind, what eventually transpired was the exact opposite. The human let out a small chuckle, a polite one, sure, but it was an expression that was rarely, if ever, expected from a being of this caliber. I was taken aback, and actually began quaking in my boots as I felt a surge of utter dread wash over me, even if logically I knew there was nothing to fear. Humans were above the pettiness of the common sapient, after all. There is no reason to be so fearful, Representative Kathleen. Curiosity is a defining feature of humanity, after all. I appreciate that this desire for knowledge, this curiosity, is not endemic to my people. The human spoke with a certain level of warmth, still set against that commanding presence. Of course, Your Grace. I humbly accept these words of praise with humble intent. I bowed once more, as the human merely stared on, her eyes shifting, watching, actually tracking me like I was but prey in her eyes. Tell me, Representative Kathleen, what exactly do you see when you look at me? My mind began to tackle the question head-on, tumbling through hoops and bounds as I tried to dissect what it was she meant. This went on for a few solid seconds as the human quickly interjected, as if she understood the storm currently brewing in my mind. Please don't overthink this. I wish for a candid and forthright answer, unfiltered by any preconceived notions of respect towards my being. I knew better than to defy this request, my lips quaking as I allowed my thoughts to dominate the conversation, unfiltered, as the human had requested. I see. I see a human, Your Grace. I see you, but obstructed, as if you're hiding. No, sorry, my sincerest apologies. Hiding is the incorrect term. It is as if who you are, is somehow hidden underneath this mechanical construct, an artificial medium that you use to communicate with us for reasons unknown. The human's eyes now shifted to something resembling an expression of understanding, as she nodded, still completely and utterly still throughout this entire exchange. You are correct about one thing, Representative, the human began, her tone softening, yet still maintaining that air of decorum and inherent authority. This is a sort of medium, a medium which allows me direct interaction with each and every individual within this galaxy and beyond. I cocked my head in confusion, opening my mouth to speak. I'm afraid I do not follow, Your Grace. To which the human once more let out that soft chuckle. This time, it felt far more personal, like a parent or an older relative of great seniority would do to a child. I didn't expect you to. I was being vague for the sake of acknowledging the relative accuracy of one of your observations, because ultimately, it is a difficult concept to truly explain to those outside of humanity. The human began to move, gesturing for me to follow as she began walking in the opposite direction of the dining hall I'd intended to visit before all of this. You see, for all intents and purposes, I am what you see. My sense of self, my identity, who I am and what I am, is here. You may call it a helmet, you may call it a uniform, you may call it a suit, but at the end of the day, this is me. She began to enter a section of the station usually cordoned off for human staff, as I hesitated to cross the threshold, only for the human to continue gesturing for me to follow. Humanity, or at least my sect of humanity, perceives our identities to be bound not to the biological substrates we were arbitrarily assigned at birth. We believe ourselves to be defined by our actions, our merits, our achievements, and ultimately our decisions of who we wish to be. The ultimate expression of this is, of course, what you see in front of you. The human stopped as we approached the end of this increasingly blank and sterile hallway. A far cry from the warm, off-white, and beige overtones of the rest of the alien quarter. What you see in front of you is me, Representative. It is who I wish to be perceived as. I have designed this helm, or helmet, as you refer to it, from the ground up. I likewise designed my clothing, my suit, and the rest of my form to match what I believe best defines me. There was yet another pause as the human placed a palm on the wall in front of us before it simply disappeared, revealing an enormous room filled sparingly with what I believed were computer servers and terminals, though the technology was far beyond me. For you see, Representative, this helm, as it were, is the medium by which all humans experience the reality around us. We can be at any place at any point in time. We can choose to experience time as fast or as slow as we wish. We can access any piece of information from the compendium of all human knowledge within a fraction of a millisecond. All of this from what you refer to as my helmet. All of this from our refusal to bend to the biological forms arbitrarily arranged by the whims of chance and organic expression. Humanity, as it was and always shall be, exists in defiance to any obstacle that imposes itself between us and our goals. The human continued forward, her footsteps echoing throughout the cavernous room that spanned hundreds, perhaps even thousands of meters in any given direction, but that slowly began to shift and form constructs more accommodating to my needs. A ceiling had quickly appeared to prevent that feeling of vertigo from forming. Large, symmetrical walls slowly came in to prevent my species' inherent agoraphobia from taking root. Indeed, it was as if the room had slowly shifted beyond my perception to resemble something more reminiscent of typical contemporary design from my species' many stellar habitats. With the sole exception of a few pieces of technology, instruments, and machines that remained as alien as they were. My perspective of the world is far different from yours, Representative, the human continued. For at this point in time I am not merely in this room, but across the stars on your home world, on the Venari's recently constructed medical research station, aboard the human exploration ship Endeavour approaching yet another galactic cluster, and a great many more places. She continued to explain in that same calm, reserved, yet personable cadence as her eyes shifted between an expression of calm to excitement to reassurance. I am connected, as all humans are. She completed her explanation before reaching what seemed to be a strange, almost completely transparent contraption that glowed an ethereal aura, reverberating between the various colors of the rainbow. And as a result, disconnecting from my primary conduit, i.e., my original body, would be a rather unpleasant affair. As you can imagine, my access to the Great Compendium would immediately be severed. My presence, my consciousness across the stars would be temporarily halted. My ability to perceive, to tinker, to adjust my perception of the world around me would be completely gone. The best analogy I can muster is perhaps sensory deprivation, although I can guarantee it would be much, much worse. The human finally stopped walking, taking a seat on the strange glowing device that somehow morphed and contorted to resemble a seat of sorts. Have I answered your question, Representative? My mind was still struggling with all these bits and pieces of information, revelation upon revelation that I just could not appreciate all at once. It was only after a solid minute of simply staring at those eyes that I finally stood firm and addressed the human. Yes, Your Grace, I understand now, or at least I am attempting to. However, you still haven't answered my question. I spoke, mustering the final few ounces of courage that I could to so brazenly defy the human. "What might that be, Representative?" the human inquired, her expression actually shifting to something other than the excitable or neutral expression that I'd always seen from her, but to one that seemed to mimic a questioning glance. You've... I understand now that the helmet, that this body, is what defines you, Your Grace, but I still wish to inquire, as silly or as selfish as it may be, what exactly is underneath it?" I gulped down a massive hiccup as I quickly knelt onto both knees. "I apologize for my brazen questioning, Your Grace. I sincerely do. I am under the assumption that I am still under your command to speak freely and without self-doubt. Hence my uncouth line of questioning, Your Grace." I attempted to explain, only for the human to step forward, placing a single, soft-gloved finger underneath my chin. "You've come farther than any other in this galaxy, or the plethora of other galaxies I currently inhabit, Representative. I applaud and condone your curiosity, though perhaps I might request that next time discussions on the limits of etiquette should be put to written form, although that is a worry for another time." The human sat back down on her seat as she let out another sigh, this time something a mix between calm and a degree of apprehension. "I have said this once in the first few instances of our first contact, and I will say this again now. I personally award acts of curiosity with what I believe are their deserving and due rewards. I will fulfill that promise today with your own brazen act of curiosity, Representative." The machines surrounding the human began to shudder and hum, analogous to a mechanical whir, but subdued. "And while you are most fortunate to have broached this topic whilst my prime nexus is present in your galaxy." A strange aura began to encircle the human's helmet as it enveloped it in an otherworldly glow of light, before the eyes suddenly shut off, causing me to shudder. As the helmet was slowly lifted, the human's body finally displayed signs of anything other than calm serenity for the first time, twitching and shivering, before finally I was face to face with what lay underneath. My heart immediately hitched up in speed and intensity, sweat poured down my forehead, and the entirety of my body shook in place. Human morphology has always been roughly similar to our own, but not in a million years would I have imagined a human face to be so captivating. She had skin, not scales. The brown, tanned dermis seemed smooth and lacked any patterns or distinguishing features, once again lacking any obvious signs of predatory intent, even more akin to prey in a sense. Yet those eyes, those forward-set, large eyes sent the entirety of my instinctive response into overdrive as I stared down what was unquestionably the eyes of a predator, far more intense than any other I'd ever witnessed. Yet despite all of that, despite everything I now bore witness to, there was something about how it all blended into a face that was unquestionably graceful and stunning. I couldn't decide whether I wished to run in abject terror at the predator that stood before me, or whether I was enthralled by their beauty and majesty. I couldn't stop staring, so much so that it was the human who broke my reverie, and not myself. And she broke it with a simple smile, one that once more caused my scales to shudder in place as I was stuck between genuine fear and awe. I can't... Your Grace, I apologize for my rudeness," was all I could say as the human merely nodded, refusing to speak. Or maybe, unable to speak? The helmet was placed back on almost as quickly as it had been removed. I counted perhaps just under a minute if my heart rate was of any indication. The helmet's, or rather, the human's eyes, seemed to buzz and shudder as if trying to correct for errors, before a solid, neutral expression once more dominated it. She took a few steps away from the chair and the apparatus behind it, approaching me slowly as she spoke. Now, it's my turn to reciprocate our exchange of curiosity. Whether it was the tone or the inflections by which the words were delivered, I couldn't help but to feel threatened by those words. But I stood my ground regardless. Your Grace? What did you see underneath the helm? The human asked, her vocoder carrying her voice with a genuine sense of curiosity as I stood there, all alone, in front of this otherworldly being. I saw a face, a human face, Your Grace. And what do you now see before you? A human face. Your face, Your Grace. The human's eyes now shifted to an expression of what could only be described as positive contentment, as she gave me the most expressive physical gesture she's offered to date. A single nod, one of approval.